Hi, and welcome back to the Game Developer News Desk live from GDC 2023. This afternoon, we are joined by the co-founder and creative director at Bonsai Collective, Benni Hill. Benni, thanks for joining us. How's your GDC going?
It's going super great. Yeah, having a really, really great show so far. Yeah.
Never a dull moment, just kind of bumping from place to place?
We're moving from place to place. We're doing a bit of showcasing on the expo floor. Lots of meetings all over the kind of show. So yeah.
That's good. I guess so. Your game's why we're here to talk to you today. You want to tell me a little bit about your game that is so subtly teased on your hat there?
Yeah, it's right there. So, sure. So we're developing a game called Lunar Abyss, which is a first-person bullet hell story shooter. It's akin to like BioShock meets Returnal, but with the mysterious kind of world building of something like Nier Automata. Yeah. So.
I feel like I'm not a bullet hell person. I admire people who have that level of skill for anything, but narrative's not a word you hear a lot with that specific genre. Usually it's like complexity and difficulty and score wars and like these very flashy battles. What was the idea for making this a really narrative-driven game, and how does that kind of manifest through gameplay?
Sure. So our kind of goals really were, we as a team, we really like high action kind of experiences, but we also really like those deep, exciting kind of like worlds to explore and kind of like dig into. So the way we've kind of structured Lunar Abyss is the game has those like intense arena kind of moments where you're kind of trying to survive and getting all the kind of kills and having a really great kind of time that's visceral, but then in between that's kind of punctuated by these quieter moments of just immersing yourself in the environment and the world. And so we have this kind of nice, these kind of peaks and troughs. So people have a bit of space in between kind of the intensity of the kind of combat to really kind of immerse themselves in the world. So.
Was that something that was kind of difficult for you guys as a team to figure out the pacing of that, or did it just click right away, or is it a lot of like play testing kind of thing?
I think it clicked quite well. We've been looking at other games that have that type of pacing. So Destiny, for example, has combat, but then it has these big kind of quiet moments where you're kind of immersing yourself in beautiful environments. So by structuring the game with what we call hard combats, which are arenas that are like locked and you have to do that. And then we have soft combats, which are what you encounter just in the standard level design as you're moving from one place to another. Like balancing that very early on when we're doing concept development, really right at the beginning of pre-production, we found like the patter, so to speak, of how our levels can be structured. So yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it then. That's like a lucky thing to kind of figure out right out of the gate in a way too. With overall, like, for bullet hell games, I feel like it's a genre that's very dominated by a few familiar faces and kind of a few like very kind of like gameplay level tropes, I guess. What do you feel makes Lunar Abyss like stand apart from others in the field, or like what did you very much want to make sure people know stand out part?
Okay, yeah. So what we really wanted with the game at the beginning was we wanted something that was challenging and had like a skill set that you can grow through the experience, but we didn't want it to have such a high point of entry into this type of game, because as I get older, my dexterity is not as good as it used to be, but I still want to play games like Quake and Doom and stuff like that. So, and so that was kind of like starting point for how we envisioned the game. And so there's a few things we had to take into consideration with that. So one of that was about aiming, and we decided very early on that we weren't going to use an iron sight based kind of like aiming mechanic in the game, and instead we're going to use a lock-on. And there's a couple of reasons that we did this and we prototyped it. Was because we don't have to think about aiming when you're using a lock-on mechanic. You're thinking about prioritization. So what enemies are doing the most damage or spawning the most bullets, and you can start to essentially kind of think about that problem rather than like a skill-based set. But also a lock-on mechanic allows you to orient yourself around a specific enemy that's emitting bullets, and so you can use that as an anchor point to actually do bullet weaving in a 3D space. Because first person, you don't have all that peripheral vision like you would get, say, in a third-person game or top-down game where you can see the whole play space, right? So yeah.
When it comes to kind of like building features in, because bullet hell games are, and I feel like I have a lot of conceptions about bullet hell games as I say them all out loud here. I've got a lot in my head about them, but there's like the difficulties, like you pride yourself on being able to be very good at this very difficult game is kind of the audience that is most associated with that. Have you found as you're adding features to make it possible for more people to play games, people with lower reaction times or different levels of dexterity, How have you managed to keep that difficulty in it? Is that something you guys have been focused on, or you just put your priorities in different areas?
Yeah, that's something that we're really focusing on at this moment in time. So we've got to a point with the game where a lot of the content is there and the features. And so like really looking at how to balance that kind of difficulty effectively. What we want to do is at the beginning of the game, like immerse the player in the kind of the world, immerse them in the atmosphere and introduce mechanics slowly. But then the difficulty does ramp up as they improve, as they kind of move forward through that kind of experience. So our goal is to allow the players to build that skill set up over a longer period of time than, say, just jumping straight into crazy bullet hell immediately. So
like fighting games in bullet hell are very much just like you learn after you get like kicked on your butt like a dozen times. So it's nice to have that approach from it, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah, completely.
You guys are on the show floor as well, you mentioned. I know we just like a couple hours past show floor open at this point, but how's that been going for you guys so far?
Really well. We've had like constant back-to-back playthroughs of the game. The demo is the first mission in the game, so it's a really great introductory experience to what we're trying to achieve. And people are like giving lots of great feedback, really enjoying the experience. Yeah, so...
It's interesting too because it's GDC, it's the Game Developers Conference. Like most of the people in attendance are game developers, so the feedback you're getting is coming from people who are well versed in the craft as well, right?
Completely. So we're getting lots of critical feedback, but it's mostly kind of really positive, with like really interesting insights that we can take back with us after the show. So
yeah, that's good. That's one of the other benefits. I'm so glad to be back in person for like the energy around here is incredible, but also there's that like level of insight you get into just bringing a game and showing it to your peers that you can get online, but to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I guess to grill you about like game development in general, how big is your team you have guys working on this right now?
So our team is 16 employees, and we have some contractors as well that we work with. So we're quite a small studio for what we're trying to achieve with Lunar Abyss, and the game's been in development for about 2.5 years at this point in time. We're a totally remote studio, so based generally around the UK. So there's always challenges with remote development and stuff, but it kind of worked out quite well for us when the pandemic hit. So and working with teams remotely prior to the pandemic, which is what me and my business partners were also doing, ended up being a boon to us, to be honest.
Yeah, there's so many tools available now that weren't available like 3-4 years ago, right? So did you guys end up scaling up during the pandemic then, or have you always been around that size?
No, we started off just with the three of us doing a concept. That's my three founders doing the concept demo, and then we just built the team gradually over a 2.5 year period. So. Yeah.
I guess, what's your view on indie development? Like, I know it's a big year for indies at GDC, it feels like, but how do you feel the world's going for indie developers as a whole right now? Really big question.
But. Oh yeah, that's a big question. I think it's changing just a little bit. I think what is an indie game is feels like that's the biggest question to me right now. Is like what constitutes an independent kind of title? You know, maybe 5-10 years ago, it was quite easy to go, well, these new smaller games that are coming out that aren't AAA are independent in some kind of capacity. Obviously, being independent financially is a part of that, but there's definitely a type of game that you could call as indie. But now that technology is advancing so much, we're using Unreal Engine, for example, and you can do so much with that engine to such a high quality with a smaller team now. Those titles are getting closer and closer to what you might consider AAA, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest change that I'm kind of seeing, I'm thinking about in the industry at this moment in time is, like, what is indie? So, you know, as the industry essentially becomes more diverse with the titles. Game Pass, for example, we get to see so much more games like that than we used to.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot to be said about like technology being accessible. Like Unreal Engine's a great example of that. Like Unity, even like engines like Godot, just being easier for people to jump into and learn game development as well. I know I'm not the one being interviewed here, but I just think it's a really important thing to highlight is like how open the game industry is and like how that indie label is expanding for kind of like the weirder definitions, but also just to get more people and more talent in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys are on the show floor. Anyone who's listening to us live right now, please go check them out at the Unreal booth, correct?
Yeah, so we're on the Unreal booth, and yeah, you just go down there, then you'll see the game Lunar Abyss just being showcased on the side of it. Yeah.
And are you guys still TBD for launch, or?
Yeah, TBD at this moment in time.
Okay, well, good luck on that road, and I hope the rest of development and the rest of the show goes well for you.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.